mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, yearning for your cure. This humble servant will be diverted from you no more.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace and blessings be on each and every one of you. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, The Best of Tawheed. And in this series, we're looking at the best evidences found in the Quran and the Sunnah, and in the explanations of the companions of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, as well as in the rulings of leading scholars of the Ummah, of the Muslim world, especially in the first generations. They have provided for us a body of information which, when studied, gives us a clear picture of Tawheed. Tawheed as it is meant to be, in its purest form, which has been protected, defended, all down the centuries, from 1,400 years ago till today. That essential understanding, that pristine clarity remains for anyone who wishes to seek it. It is true that in much of the Muslim world, Tawheed is confused. In fact, when we go into schools and many institutions in different parts of the world, very little time is spent on it. A number of the institutions teach Greek philosophy, Greek philosophical arguments, about God's existence and things like this, are taught in the place of classical Tawheed, as understood by that early generation. So there is a major lack of clarity in this area. And as a result, there are many forms of shirk which have crept in to the body of thinking of the Muslim masses, from Guyana, South America, to Mindanao, Philippines. Muslims in between, you can find them doing all kinds of things. Things which had their origin in Christianity, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, Confucianism, animism. They've taken bits and pieces, they've kept it with them. It still affects their understanding. So there is a need to purify, to correct, clean up this confused view and confused understanding of what constitutes Tawheed. An understanding which became so confused that you had people like Ibn Arabi, Al-Hallaj, who were claiming that everything was Allah and Allah was everything. That was Ibn Arabi. There's no distinction between the Creator and His creation. It's all one. That this was Tawheed. There's the one there. Or the idea that the human soul could reunite with the divine soul. This was Al-Hallaj claiming he was Allah. Ana al-Haq, his famous claim, I am the embodiment of truth. Believing that this was Tawheed at its pinnacle. So it's not surprising then if you had leading figures, from the Sufi tradition who are making these kinds of claims, that the ideas spread to the masses. Maybe not in the same form. You don't have the average person walking on the street believing that he is Allah. That's not that common. You don't really find that too much. But the idea that Allah is everywhere is widespread. And it is the basis of justification for idolatry. Because if Allah is everywhere, He can be in anything. So you can worship any object because you're worshipping not the object itself, but Allah who is in that object, since Allah is in everything. And you can even worship yourself, which some, like Ibn Arabi, also stated. You know, why worship God outside of you when God is in you? You can worship yourself. So these expressions were taken by bodies of people to be expressions of Tawheed. But in fact, they were expressions of shirk. So when you have a confused state like that, with these leading figures, and their ideas are promoted and widespread, people relay them, they teach them, etc., then it's not surprising to find a lot of confusion there in the minds of the general masses. So there is this great need to revive Tawheed in the Ummah, as there was a great need to revive the fiqh, Islamic law, the implementation of the law. There's a great need for that, as it had become corrupted to the point where some people from different schools of thought wouldn't pray behind people from other schools of thought. The Hanafi school declared that it was not permissible to marry a Shafi'i. Around the Kaaba there were 4 different prayers going on, one for each school of thought. All this is corruption and distortion, misguidance in the madhabs. That was not the intent of those, the founders who people attribute the madhabs to. It was not their intent, that was not their way. Had they known that this was going to be a consequence, they would have warned very strongly against it. And they did warn their followers from blindly following anyway. But the point is that in all the aspects of Islam, whether it is in governance, the implementation, setting up of the Islamic State and its functions, there are problems. Most of the Muslim countries don't do it. They only take a bit from here and a bit from there of Islamic law, and they keep it on the books. But for the most part, in the vast majority of Muslim countries, Sharia is not the constitution. So we have problems from all sides. This program, the best of Tawheed, is focusing on the theology. How do we understand God? And this is the crux of the matter. Because if we mess up in our economics, we mess up in our governance, we can get by. But if we mess up in our Tawheed, then we lose everything. So we have been looking at Tawheed in relative depth. Of course, the nature of this program doesn't allow us to go into a lot of detail, but we have tried to cover the key areas that are necessary for us to have clarity as to who is Allah. In our last series of segments, we were looking at intercession. And this is a big area in which Tawheed al-Ibadah, or the unity of worship, is compromised and violated. When people seek intercession from other human beings, or even seek intercession from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in their lives now, right now, they call on the Prophet ﷺ to do things for them. And this is shirk. This is not acceptable. This was not the way of the Sahaba. We don't have any evidences that Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, or Ali. We had incidences where Umar ibn al-Khattab, for example, when they had drought, and because they used to ask the Prophet ﷺ whenever there was drought, major drought, they would ask the Prophet ﷺ to make the prayer for rain. They call it Salatul Istisqa. But when the Prophet ﷺ died, and they went out to pray Salatul Istisqa, that's the rain prayer, Umar ibn al-Khattab made the dua saying, the supplication saying aloud for everybody, O Allah, when we did not have rain, we asked the Prophet ﷺ to pray for us, and you gave us rain. Now we ask the uncle of the Prophet to pray for us, so give us rain. And then he would ask Al-Abbas to pray for them and beseech Allah. He did not adjure Allah to give rain in the name or based on the position Al-Abbas, which he had before Allah. He didn't ask him to do that. If it had been the case, the companions would have done it by the Prophet ﷺ's position and honor. But they didn't do that. They just asked Al-Abbas to pray because he was closest to the Prophet ﷺ, and they hoped that because of who he was relative to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah would look favorably at them and give them rain. So this was as much as they did. They did not call on the Prophet ﷺ. With that, we're going to take a brief break, and I'll see you after the break. Welcome back from the break. Prior to the break, we were looking at the issue of intercession with the Prophet ﷺ, calling on him. The companions did not do it. They did not ask the Prophet ﷺ after he died. They didn't call on him to do anything for them, as many people do today. Instead, they did ask those who were living, who were close to the Prophet ﷺ, to make dua on their behalf for rain. But none of them were recorded to have called on the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, which emphasizes that this is not a legitimate option. That's what it emphasizes for us. Now, people have developed other types of wording to cover up this calling on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a means of interceding on their behalf. Now, in our previous session, we did look at various types of intercession, whether it was the major intercession, Shafa' al-Kubra, or intercession for those whose good deeds and bad deeds were equal, they were held in place, interceding for those people who were told to go off to hell and before they went. We also had intercession of raising people's ranks in paradise, raising their ranks in hellfire, getting a lesser punishment. And we looked at up to the point of taking people out of hell, people who had been placed in hell because their evil deeds outweighed their good deeds, so they ended up in hell. They're being punished in hell. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after Allah decided that such people would be removed, they had been punished sufficiently, Allah had the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ be the one to take them out. And we have a particular hadith in Sahih Muslim in which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, describing what was going on the Day of Judgment, he said in a narration from Anas ibn Malik, "They will come to me and I will ask my Lord's permission. And when I see him, I will fall down in prostration before him. And he will leave me in that state as long as he wills. And then I will be addressed, raise up your head and ask, and your request will be granted. Speak and you will be heard. Seek intercession, it will be granted. I will raise my head and I will glorify and praise my Lord. With a saying he will teach me, and then I will intercede. Allah will fix a limit for me, and I will take them out of the fire and let them enter paradise. Then I will come back and fall in prostration, and I will do the same for the third and fourth times, till no one remains in the fire except those whom the Quran has imprisoned in it." So the Prophet ﷺ will take people out of the fire who were being punished but who were believers. So Allah was going to let them out, but He let the Prophet ﷺ have the honor of being the one who would remove them. Following that, after all of the intercession was finished, then Allah Himself will intercede. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri quoted the Prophet ﷺ as saying on the Day of Judgment, then Allah exalted and great will say, the angels have interceded, the messengers have interceded, and the believers have interceded. And no one remains to intercede except the most merciful of the merciful. He will then take a handful from the fire and bring out of it people who never did any good and who had been turned into charcoal, and cast them into a river called the River of Life on the outskirts of paradise. They will sprout as a seed sprouts from the silt carried by the flood. You see it near the stone or near the tree. That part exposed to the sun is yellowish or greenish, and the part under the shade is white. So those people will be extracted from the hellfire. That's the final intercession, and that will be the intercession of Allah Himself. It should be noted that in the whole process of intercession, the disbeliever will not benefit from the intercession of any intercessor. The person was a disbeliever. All of these different forms of intercession we spoke about will not benefit them in the least, with the exception of those whose status in hell is alleviated because of some good which they did. And we know that from the fact that the Prophet ﷺ had declared that his own father would be in hell. So if the Prophet ﷺ was unable to intercede on behalf of his father to get him out of hell, meaning his father was an idol worshipper, disbeliever, who died in that state. So if he was unable to get him out of hell, then it must mean that nobody is able to do that. Because of course he would have been the first to do it for his own father. Now, there is a form of seeking the Prophet ﷺ as an intercessor where the words used are vague and are clouded or cloaked in a language which makes it not so obvious. One of the common phrases that is said is bihaqqin nabi, by the right of the Prophet. But the reality is that the Prophet has no right on Allah. All human beings have a right on Allah, as Allah has a right on them. This is a basic right. And this is something which the Prophet ﷺ spoke about in a particular narration in which he, on one occasion, was riding on a donkey, and Mu'adh ibn Jabal was riding behind him on that donkey. So he said to him, O Mu'adh, do you know what the right of Allah is upon His servants? And Mu'adh replied, Allah and His Messenger knows best. The Prophet ﷺ said, His right upon them is that they should worship Him alone and not ascribe anything as a partner to Him. Do you know what the right of the servants of Allah is upon Allah? Mu'adh replied again, Allah and His Messenger know best. So the Prophet ﷺ went on to say, their right upon him is that he should not punish them. That is the right, that he should not punish them. And Allah, of course, would spare all those who fulfilled the right of worshiping Him alone. So when we use by the right of so-and-so, bihaqq al-nabi, or bihaqq, choosing one of the awliya, whatever, bihaqq Abdul Qadir Jilani or whatever, by their right on you, I'm asking you, Allah, to do something for me. This phrase, this form of expression, is something which is displeasing to Allah. It has in it shirk. It should be avoided for the following three reasons. First and foremost, it is a form of swearing by someone other than Allah. Like we talked about people who said in the West, I swear on my mother's grave. This is shirk, not acceptable. Secondly, it involves the belief that someone has a right over Allah. Beyond the general statement of the Prophet ﷺ that we all have a right on Allah, that if we don't worship anyone besides him, he won't punish us. That is it. There's no other right. No special right for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ different from the rest of human beings. And thirdly, this form of calling on Allah is an innovation. It is an innovation in Islam, as it was never narrated from the Prophet ﷺ or any of his companions, nor any of the tabi'un, those who were students of his companions, or any of the great imams. None of them said this. It is only found in the temples and in amulets which are written by ignorant people. It is common amongst them. Supplication, basically, is one of the greatest acts of worship. The Prophet ﷺ had said, "Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah." Supplication is, in fact, the essence of worship. So, worship must be founded on the Quran and the Sunnah, what Allah has said in the Quran and the Sunnah. And we need to obey and worship according to what the Prophet ﷺ left us. It's not on us, or not allowed for us, to make up our own forms of worship. What we think, what we feel, what pleases us. If we do that, then we are not really worshiping Allah. We're worshiping our own desires. We're following our desires. Our desires say do this, we do it. They say do that, we do that. So this form of supplication is unacceptable to Allah. So for these three reasons that I mentioned, we should avoid them totally. With that, dear viewers, we now come to the end of this episode of The Best of Tawheed. And we hope to see you again in future episodes where we will continue to look at the evidences which prove the clarity of Tawheed, which is taught in the reliable and authentic universities of Islam, which the Ummah needs today in order to be able to uplift itself with the help of Allah from all perspectives. With that, dear viewers, we bid you farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me